Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Magnetic Marketing. I am your host, Lexi Forbes, and today we have a really special episode because we are going to be looking at America's birth chart, the United States of America. Or, well, are we united or are we just the states? The point is, we're going to look at July 4th, 1776 at 5:10 p.m. You can go ahead and pull that up on your own if you want to on your own favorite astrology apps. My favorite is Time Passages, but maybe you're using, I don't know, whatever else is out there. Then if you want to look up some stuff, if you're an astrology nerd like me, then that's the date that we're looking at. And I also want to preface this by saying I have looked at America's birth chart a couple of times, but I haven't done like a deep dive like this into the chart. And honestly, part of the reason why is because the way that I do astrology readings is I try my hardest to rely on my intuitiveness instead of the knowledge of astrology. I think knowing all the things is good, but sometimes the knowledge gets in the way of the intuitiveness. And since I know that I'm gifted at reading the stars, I take what I've learned and, have actually like book learning kind of thing, but I also combine it heavily with what feels in alignment, what's coming through the chart. Because a lot of times when I'm looking at the chart, it's literally like it's like speaking to me. I can see it. Things just stand out to me. So I haven't. My point to saying all that is that I haven't actually taken a lot of time to look at this chart. So there might be some things that I miss, and that's why I definitely want to hear from you guys in the comments. Let me know what are some of the insights that you see, or the questions that you have around America's birth chart and where we're headed. In today's episode, what we're going to focus on is America's chart. What are its strengths? What are its weaknesses? Why was it created according to the stars? And then I'm also going to pull up a transits chart so we can look at what's happening today and what is the relationship between, or the conversations that the planets of yesteryear, its original birth chart, is having with the planets of today. So that's going to be a really interesting reading. I love, this is how I do my readings anyway. I typically start with the birth chart reading where we're focusing on what happened the day that you were born. And then at the end of the reading, I tend to focus on maybe a particular date, a launch date that you're looking for, or we focus just on today so you can understand more of the lessons that you're currently experiencing and all of that. So let's dive in. And I wish I could show you guys the chart, but like I said, pull it up. It's going to be July 4th, 1776 at 5:10 p.m. LMT in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So the first thing that I see right off the bat, honey, that I find to be so interesting is that so the sun sign, let's first go down the list, okay? The big three of America, and please tell me if this shocks you, because it kind of shocks me. I can tell because it's July 4th, but July 4th means that America is a Cancer. What? And I know some people have negative experiences with Cancers. I love Cancers because they're my sister sign as a Capricorn. They really understand me. They get me. I love them. Of course, they have their shadow sides, but we all have our shadow sides. I love Cancer energy. So I find it interesting. Cancer energy is so nurturing and emotional, and it's here to teach us how to connect with our emotions and connect with the divine feminine and really lean into the flow of life. It's a water sign, it's a cardinal water sign. So in that way, I can kind of see with America moving through life as like the first and trying to do all these things before everyone else, or at least saying that they're doing things before everyone else. I can kind of see that coming from a cardinal sign, which the cardinal signs are the signs that start off a season. So Cancer starts off summer, making it a cardinal sign. And the fact that it just is so interesting to me that it's a Cancer. And I just find that crazy that it actually is a Cancer, that it's supposed to be this place that is very nurturing, very connected to its divine feminine. And what I also find interesting is, you know what, before I go there, let's just stay there. So Cancer sun, then it's an Aquarius moon, which I can kind of see that. Aquarius is very unique. and it looks at the world through the eyes of how can I support the people? How can I show up for the revolution? And so when you think of America's start, depending on the history that you know, because that's even that is problematic. Some of us were taught a false history that we then learned in 2020 about the real history of how America began and all the things that they weren't necessarily running away from religious freedom or religious persecution as much as they were trying to create their own thing and all this other stuff. But it just depends on who you're talking to as to what that history is. But the point is that at some point there was this desire to be unique, to do their own thing. And because America can be easily offended by trying to be like everyone else, because the moon represents our emotions. Oh, you know what, my dog, hold on. I got to be careful, you guys, because I didn't warn you guys, but I have two babies, Cameron and Katie. Today is Cameron's birthday. He's 1 year old. Yeah. And so you may see them in the video, but if he starts barking, please, forgive me. But I think we're good. He's just moving around. Okay. What was I talking about? Oh, the moon. So the moon represents our emotions. And so the fact that the moon was in the sign of Aquarius when America was being created suggests that part of what offends America is trying to be like everyone else. It wants to be unique. It wants to be its own voice. It wants to be, and especially because it's a Cancer sun, a cardinal energy, not only does it want to be its own unique self, but it wants to be the first at being the most unique, as evidenced by some of the things that we're seeing where, we have ChatGPT versus DeepSeek, I believe, that just dropped. And there's just this competition with other countries over different kinds of things, whether we're talking about education or we're talking about AI and technology or who's going to get to the moon first, like there's always been this competitive nature, and that's competition is definitely not an Aquarius energy. But what I will say is that because it is, again, wanting to be first with the Cancer sun and wanting to be unique in how it does things and how it expresses itself, that's where you're getting that Aquarius moon energy. Then it's a Sagittarius rising. And that to me makes a little bit more sense. But at the same time, it also, it tells me when I see Cancer sun, Aquarius moon, Sagittarius rising, typically when it's in its light, and when I say that, I mean like when it's at its highest peak, its highest self, versus when it's in its shadow, which could be, kind of the parts of us that we're not as proud of. And I think America definitely deals a lot with the shadow self. When I look at Sagittarius, it's a fire sign. And so the rising sign represents how you look on the outside. It also sets the tone and the perspective of how you look at life, the perspective that you have, the lens at which you look at everything. And so Sagittarius is very much a freedom loving sign, and actually so is Aquarius. And so when you add Sagittarius rising to the mix, there's going to be this natural desire to always want to do things for the pursuit of truth, for the pursuit of authenticity, of doing things in a way that feels in alignment with who I am. And because Sagittarius is the rising sign for America, there's always this desire. Sometimes that can lead to a sense of insecurity of always wanting to make sure that I feel free, that I feel like I'm not being caged in, that I have this expansion energy at all times, even if sometimes it's to my own detriment. I just need to feel like I have no barriers. And that can be great. You may hear that and be like, oh, that's wonderful. What's the problem with that? But there's nothing wrong sometimes with having, like, if you're about to fall off a cliff, you probably want a barrier. And so there's nothing wrong with having these goalposts or fences around certain things. And Sagittarius rising typically breaks down that fence and is like, I'd rather jump off the cliff, If you know a Sag, then you know that that's very common. So that could be it's in its shadow when it's not at its highest energy. There's this desire so much for freedom that it does things in a way that's kind of like, that didn't make sense, honey. Why did you do that? And we see that sometimes with Sagittarius, with America, in addition to its impulsivity, because it's a fire sign, which the fire signs are Sagittarius, Leo, and Aries. I would say Aries is the most impulsive, but Sagittarius is a close second. And so there's not always a plan as much as there's just like a reaction to things. There's a constant sense of just, I'm not thinking about it, I'm just reacting. So that's its big three: Cancer Sun, Aquarius Moon, Sagittarius Rising. Let's go through everything else. So it has a Cancer Mercury, which is interesting because it was retrograding when America was born. So Mercury has so America has a retrograding Mercury, which I find that to be very interesting. It also has a Cancer Venus, a Gemini Mars, which that right there, that says so much, a Cancer Jupiter, Libra Saturn, Gemini Uranus, Virgo Neptune, Captain Planet, okay, Capricorn Pluto, and Aries Chiron, which that is very interesting that it has a in its chart. Okay, we'll talk about that. Chiron and Aries. And then also the North Node in Leo. Very interesting. So this is, if you're an astrologer, there's probably some things that stand out to you. I would love to hear, did you kind of find yourself going like, oh my goodness, a Gemini Mars, that makes so much sense. I would love to know your take on it, because for me personally, number one, let's start with Mercury. The fact that Mercury was retrograding at the time of America's birth explains so much about how things were so backwards when it comes to the communication and understanding and thought process behind. When you look at the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and all these things, these documents are so beautiful because they provide such a sense of freedom for all people. And yet there was this disconnect because they weren't treating all people with equal rights at the time, whether it was brown and black people, whether it was women or queer people, whether it was disabled people. I mean, there were so many minority groups that were not included in this like sense of, you deserve the same amount of freedom as a Christian white male cisgendered male. It's insane how they didn't see the connection between the two, and yet they created these beautiful documents that allowed for freedom at some point. So that is very interesting to me, but it makes sense because when Mercury is in retrograde, things are a little backwards. Things don't quite make sense. And when you're talking about a planet that influences our way of thought, going backwards at the time when you're trying to think out, how do we create this country, it makes sense that there would be disconnect between action and communication, right? And so we see that there. In addition to the fact that Mercury is in Cancer, which I find that to also be so interesting. There is, America honestly has a stellium in Cancer, and I think that's the only place that it does have a stellium, which is even crazier. The Sun, Mercury, Jupiter, can you believe that? Jupiter, the planet of abundance, is in the sign of the divine feminine. Interesting. Jupiter and Venus are all in Cancer. And so there's a heavy, heavy focus in America's expression and connection to the divine feminine, which is very interesting considering the fact that America has a problem with the divine feminine. We see that it's a very patriarchal society, and so the more that they embrace, the less that they embrace the divine feminine and the connection with flow and honoring intuitiveness and connecting with that, the less that they do that, the more that they dive into the shadow side of it all, which can be very cold and isolating and disconnected from its emotion, and possibly even manipulative in how it controls other people's emotions, because Cancer energy rules over the emotions, the expression of the emotion. And so that means that in its highest light, it can create empathy and inspire people to feel connections to each other. But in its shadow, it can remove its emotions and act cold and just be so disconnected and be like, I don't care. You're like, you guys, there goes Cammy. And be like, I don't care how you feel, it can then also be, because it can be so caring. And the same thing with Aquarius energy, because Aquarius can be so caring and so kind. It's all about the community. Cancer is all about, Aquarius is all about the community. Cancer is all about, the nurturing, the family unit, all of that. When it's in its highest, it's going to value family values and freedom, community expressions, and dreams and dreaming big. But when it's in its shadow, it's going to value not allowing people to express themselves, not having freedom, not having the ability to dream big, not caring about the community, completely absent of nurturing and family values. Like, that's going to be its shadow side. But I just, I see right here with that Mercury in Cancer and the stellium in Cancer, I can see how the goal of America was to have this nurturing, safe space for people to be able to express themselves and find freedom because of that Aquarius moon, because of that Sagittarius rising. But it seems as if there is a disconnect, and I believe some of that is because we had that Mercury in retrograde. The other thing that I find interesting, let's skip on ahead to Cancer and Gemini. The reason why I mean, Cancer and Jupiter, the reason why I love Jupiter and Cancers is because it expands. Jupiter itself is the planet of abundance, so it expresses, like, when you take on the characteristics of the zodiac sign that's in Jupiter, you bring in more abundance and you make it easier to manifest. So when somebody tells me I'm trying to manifest something, I immediately am like, girl, what's your Jupiter? And what house is it in? Which we didn't even talk about the houses. So we're going to talk about that too. But I immediately ask that question because when we take on those characteristics and we do the things that allow you to express yourself as that particular zodiac sign, you'll find that you'll manifest a lot faster. So with Jupiter being in Cancer, it's crazy because it's like, when America embraces the divine feminine, embraces family values and nurturing and connecting with, um, intuitiveness and feelings and honoring the truth of the feminine, it actually expands. It builds more wealth. It builds more creativity and connection. But when it doesn't, when it denies its feminine energy and it denies its connection to its intuition and it lets other things lead the way, maybe money or, again, wanting to be first, or even if it's not completely ready yet, or things like that, it it shrinks America's success. And so I find that interesting that America, who we struggle so much with it not connecting to the divine feminine and being so wrong towards its women, wrong towards, and let me say this before I move forward. Everyone has masculine and feminine energy. It is not based off of like, oh, I'm a woman, therefore I am feminine. It's not like that. I have both masculine and feminine in me, and so do you. It's just a matter of where you feel most connected to in its expression. Some of us feel more connected to our masculine energy. A lot of that also you can see in the chart. Some of us feel more connected to our feminine energy. Some of us feel connected equally to both. And so we want to express ourselves equally to both, which makes so much sense. So it's not about, oh, well, feminine equals woman. That doesn't really equate. But when we look at how America treats feminine energy, I mean, hello. You know what I mean? Like we when we talk about flow and intuition, all of those characteristics are connected to the feminine. When we see people who are very feminine in their energy and very expressive in their feminine energy and comfortable in their feminine energy, they are seen as weaker than someone who expresses themselves as masculine, right? And we see that connection continuously. And I think it's because, again, America's obsession with not accepting its own luck, accepting its own feminine energy and that connection there. So that I just find very interesting. And I wonder if we're always going to have this tug of war with trying to find equal footing because of that Jupiter in Cancer. So I find that to be interesting. Also, what's funny to me is that Jupiter and Venus are conjunct. So Jupiter is at 5 degrees Cancer, Venus is at 3 degrees Cancer. So they're right on top of each other, and it's in the seventh house of relationships. So both family dynamics, nurturing, divine feminine, building a home, and the relationships, friendships, partnerships, all of that we have in our lives are the things that are the most valuable for America. When it embraces partnership, when it embraces the home, when it embraces the divine feminine, which is also, Venus is also very much a feminine energy. And so when it embraces the femininity of the Venus expression in beauty and in food and in enjoying things, like Venus energy is very much like not only about beauty, but also about like more, having a lot of things. And when it embraces abundance, there you go. That's rather not just more, just abundance. When it embraces, hey, let's make it equal for everybody, right? And let's make it abundant for everybody, then it acts as a tool for manifestation. But in its shadow, it's going to be very self-centered and very like, okay, well, then I don't care about everyone having a piece of the pie. I care about me having the piece of the pie. And I think we're literally watching that happen right now in front of our eyes with our leader, where the focus is taking away grants, taking away public programs, taking away financial things to take care of the people and the partnerships and the relationships, putting tariffs on these relationships that stress the relationships between this country and our other allies or countries and things like that. Those relationships are now kind of up in the air, and people have their ways and their feelings about Americans and how they feel. And that's not going to be helpful for us because our birth chart is saying relationships is part of our abundance, and valuing those relationships and creating equality, since it's in that seventh house of relationships and connection and justice and peace. It is something that when it embraces justice, peace, and equality, it expands. But when it chooses to focus on selfish reasons and selfish desires, it shrinks. It all of a sudden becomes more challenging for it to create wealth, create abundance, create happiness, and all of that. There's like it's imbalanced. And so I find that interesting that Jupiter and Venus are right next to each other in that seventh house of partnerships and relationships. Now, Mars in Gemini, that creates kind of this very unexpected, um, this unexpected way of like how it's motivated. So because it's an air sign, it's air sign energy, and especially Gemini's, is very eclectic. And so it, again, kind of like the Aquarius, which is also an air sign, it wants to be known for its difference. It wants to be known. But the thing with Gemini energy is not only does it want to be known for its difference, it also wants to be known for its knowledge. And so what I find interesting is that we are like at the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to our knowledge, right? In America compared to other countries, right? We're like number 47 in like education. I mean, I don't know. My point is we're really low, and yet we are motivated by the knowing, by having the education, by having the knowledge. So that shows you once again how we're so out of alignment with our chart, because we should be known for our what for our education. We should be known and motivated for what we know and what we've learned. And like people should be able to come here and be like, oh wow, I have access to, maybe free school, or I have access to learning like all these great things inside of said free school. Because obviously we have free public schools, but those are also problematic in terms of what they're actually teaching and the truth that they're teaching versus the non-truths and all the things, right? And then we also have all these issues when it comes to education and the cost of higher learning, and should it be free? And we're always fighting over how do we provide education to the American people, and what are the American people owed when it comes to the knowing and the learning of knowledge. I find that to be interesting, that we have these arguments and we have this conversation happening at the same time that Mars is in Gemini, that like our Mars is in Gemini. I also find it interesting that one of the things that, number 47, because I refuse to say his name, okay? Number 47, one of the things that he wanted to do is get rid of the Department of Education. And that is so out of alignment with the chart with America's chart. America is motivated by learning and educating itself and educating its people. So to get rid of something that provides a doorway and access to education, it's so out of alignment with its highest expression of self. So that, kind of tells you something there. Also, what I also see before we move on, because now I'm going to move on into the next phase, focused on what we can expect today, like what's happening today. Something that I find interesting is that Pluto was in Capricorn when America was born, and it was in its second house, which is the house of values, of money, of abundance. But Pluto, wherever it lands, brings transformation to wherever house it's in, or whatever sign it's in. And because Capricorn rules over, and it was also retrograding. That's also what's really crazy too. It was retrograding. So it rules over, Capricorn rules over government, over leadership, career, purpose, the legacy that you leave behind. The fact that Pluto is in that sign says that there's a lot of endings and beginnings, like almost like restarts all the time when it comes to leadership and government and control and power. It's like things constantly are shifting, which we can see in the sense that, for example, we believe that we should be able to vote for the president, that he should only have, as we know today anyway, but we'll see, that he should only have the ability to serve for 8 years, and then he can't go again, 2 terms, and that's it. We have these limits that we create so that there's this constant opportunity for something new, right? Instead of having like a king and queen where it's always the same. That kind of makes sense when you think of Pluto being in Capricorn. But with Pluto also being in the second house of money and values, there's always this tug of war between what do we value. There's this lack of connection with it. And because Pluto was retrograding in this house, there's a lack of understanding, and a lack of a why am I struggling with the words? And Mercury's not even in retrograde right now, but Mars is. um, Anyways, but there's a disconnect. There you go. It's not a lack of, but there's just a disconnect between how do we express our values, what does it look like, and what we actually do. And again, we see that because we as a Black person in America, honey, I know what I am told my rights are, but I also know the reality of what will keep me the safest as a Black person and as a Black woman in America, and a Black queer woman at that. Like there's a lot of rules that I have to follow that go unsaid, right? And so that kind of makes sense that for many people in America, they have to follow these unspoken rules that they don't know exist and or do know exist. They know that the rule exists, but then everyone else doesn't get it. They're like, no, the racism doesn't exist, boo. It's done. Obama was president, You're like, girl, the disconnect. What's going on? But that makes sense because Pluto was retrograding in the house of values. And so how we express those values sometimes doesn't always align. In addition to money, money is a relationship that's always like uh, problematic. There's always this like disconnect between how do we spend our money, where do we take it, how do we give it to people, and how do we spend it, how do we save it, where does it go? A lot of us disagree with how America spreads its budgets and does all the things that it does with its money. That kind of tracks for the fact that Pluto, the planet of transformation, was in the house of money, that there would be this constant up and down, back and forth. We're going to do this, then we're going to do that. We're going to end this. We're going to begin that. We're going to do this when it comes to money and values. The other thing that I also want to say is the North Node is in Leo and the South Node is in Aquarius. The North Node tells us where we're headed and like who we want to become at our highest self. And the South Node tells us what we've already mastered and what we can leave behind, what we need to learn to let go of. So part of America's challenge is learning how to embrace the leadership while also keeping the community's best interest in mind, and leaving behind being so focused on giving to everyone that we end up harming everyone. So depending on where you stand on things, some people disagree with socialism and are like, why should everyone get everything? Like you should be able to earn your way to the top and do this and blah, blah, blah. That kind of tracks with Aquarius being in the South Node, where it's like, I feel like we should let go of the idea, the concept that everyone should have, but rather it should be based off of merit and work ethic and, all this other stuff. That tracks with a South Node in Aquarius and tracks with a North Node in Leo, where it's based off of the connections that you have, the boldness that you have, the pull yourself up by the bootstraps vibe. That makes sense. America would feel that way. And what we're trying to find is the balance between that. How do we make sure that people have the opportunity to actually all pull themselves up by the bootstraps and create an independent self that is self-sufficient, while also providing for the community? And we're trying to go back and forth between what does that mean, right? We don't want to just give handouts, but we also don't want to prevent people from getting what they so rightly deserve. Just because they didn't have the opportunity, maybe because they didn't have, they weren't born into a family with a lot of wealth, or their color is not the color that everyone likes, or they don't have the same abilities as other people. And so because of that, that prevents them from, it's just like that thing. There's this photo of like a fish, and it's like, if you're trying to teach it how to climb a tree, you know what I mean? Then you're going to be like, oh, this fish is dumb, but it's a fish. It's supposed to be in the ocean. So of course it's not going to climb a tree. And that, it doesn't mean that it's dumb. It means that it's in the wrong environment. And there's plenty of people where it's like, well, I wasn't given the ability to to excel because they didn't use my strengths. I was a fish and they were trying to make me climb a tree, and then they called me dumb because I couldn't climb it. Like, what the hell? And so I hope that makes sense. But my point being is just that part of America's purpose is trying to create that equality so everybody has a rich environment to nurture themselves and grow and become this light that Leo energy is, and become this bold, bright, confident lioness kind of vibe. But when it's in its shadow, then it's going to be more of the ego type of vibe, and very much like, look at me, I need attention, and what I need matters more than anybody else. I can say that because I'm a Leo moon, so I'm very aware of Leo energy. So I know it's shadow side as well. Okay. So, but yeah, so that's kind of interesting there, to kind of see that. So now let's look at, now that we've seen its characteristics, let's look at the transit wheel. So the transit wheel is what's happening today. I know this episode is a bit longer than normal, but we're diving in, honey. We're doing a lot of things. Okay, so the first thing that I see, oh my God, is we have a strong Aquarius stellium right now, happening in the skies, and it is conjunct the South Node in Aquarius and the Pluto. And oh wait, no, it's not conjunct Pluto and Capricorn. The South Node in Aquarius. And what I also find interesting is it's not conjunct, it's not right next to, but with the moon, when the moon is in Aquarius, it's basically connecting to the natal moon. Of natal means the original birth chart, it's connecting to that energy. So there's like a confidence that happens to Americans, America, and its expression when the moon is in Aquarius, because it feels most aligned. And so that's interesting that it's like now we have a new moon in Aquarius that's about to happen on Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday, and it's Tuesday. So again, connection there. But we have Mercury, Pluto, which Pluto just moved into Aquarius. It's at 1 degrees. Mercury, Pluto, the moon, and the sun all in the sign of Aquarius right now. And because of it, not only that, it's also in its second house of money and values. So I mean, we're really experiencing a redefining of how to spend money, of what our values are, of how we attract abundance and what abundance even looks like for us. That is definitely part of the conversation, which you can kind of see in the sense that with Pluto in Aquarius right now, what it's, and Pluto being in the second house, today there was an announcement that that 47 is going to be, or put a freeze on like federal grants and things like that. And grants are provided for education, are provided for, there might be some for WIC, women and children, the program for that. Why can't I remember that? I was a social worker and I can't remember the breakdown of it, the name of it, but that's all right. SNAP and food stamps and things like that. Like those are all grants, and they're all provided for people who don't have, right? Who don't have access to fresh fruits and vegetables, who don't have access to formula because it's so expensive, and who need the support and need the help. And yet he just put a freeze on their access, right? And it's interesting because with Pluto being in the second house, it's like, okay, there's an ending here to how we spend money, and there's going to be a renewing and a re-beginning of where that money is allocated. Where it's going to go, great question. I don't know. But the fact is that for a while Pluto is going to be in Aquarius for the next 20 years. So we're really going to see a huge shift in how America values its money. And I'm praying that somehow in this world, that, or in this time frame, before I transition myself into becoming a star seed, I hope that I witness America returning back to, not returning back because I can't say that it was ever there, but coming to its desired roots, and actually giving it back to the people, caring about the people and the way that they spend their money. So I definitely, we'll see how that looks, but I find that interesting to see, right off the bat, that Pluto is in the house of money. And right now there's a lot of talk about how are we spending our money, and there's a lot of stopping of some of the ways that we used to spend our money versus how we are now. The other thing that stands out to me is Mars is currently in, let's see, Cancer, and it's in its eighth house. So that is interesting. Oh, here's another thing. So the natal chart, meaning the birth chart, the sun was in the eighth house. So America's sun is in the eighth house, the house of transformation, of change, of death, of endings, of new beginnings, all of that. That is very interesting, that it's like it's a constant changing, expression of self. But the fact that Mars right now is so close to where the sun was when America was born, and the fact that right now it's in its eighth house, again, there's this like transformation piece that's happening with America. Right now, the motivation of America is how can I change what has been? And because of that, there's going to be a shakeup. There's going to be a change. And because Mars is in a water sign, that change can come like a trickling river or a huge hurricane. And I feel like that's what we're experiencing right now, is that huge hurricane like energy where we're constantly being inundated with news and information and all these different things. And it's like, it's kind of confusing and overwhelming 100%. But that makes sense when Mars is in Cancer and it's in its eighth house. There's going to be this constant sense of like doom almost, and transformation. So I find that to be very interesting. But that, again, it tracks that because Mars is in Cancer, because right now I feel like, and it's retrograding in Cancer, because of that, there's this, well, you know what? Here's the thing too, with the retrograde as well, it slows down motivation. So instead of it being motivated to take action, to care for people, to care for the, again, that Cancer energy of caring for the divine feminine and caring for the home and family and all the values, because it's retrograding, it's going backwards on that. And it's like, maybe caring about the family and caring about the nurturing and caring about that isn't as important as caring about the opposite of that. And so we can kind of see that playing out right now. Let's see. The other thing that I see is currently Jupiter is in Gemini and it's in America's sixth house, which kind of tracks with why America at this time is starting to reevaluate its food sources, its health, and healthcare system. There's, for a while, there's been this obsession about our obesity rates and, whether or not our food is actually food and all these different things. And like whether or not, it's healthy to be this weight or healthy to be like, this obsession with our bodies is just all over the place. But it makes sense with Jupiter being in the house of health that there's this desire to focus on that. But again, but Jupiter's retrograding. So instead of it being a healthy expression, it's coming across with this anti-health message, like, oh, we're pretending to really care about people's health, but in reality there's something backwards, there's something else that's happening that you can't necessarily see, so you got to be careful. There's a lot of retrograding planets right now, so a lot of the things that once saw before, that you thought like, oh, I thought that this is what it looked like, that this is what it's going to be. Like they're putting one thing in front of you, and then behind the scenes, there's something else happening. And that's because there's so many planets retrograding right now. So I find that to be interesting that Jupiter is there. But what I also see is that because Jupiter is in Gemini and it's retrograding, soon it will be in the sign of Cancer, which means that, and I believe that's going to happen over the summer actually, that Jupiter will transit into the sign of Cancer, which then means America will go through its Jupiter return. Why is that significant? When Jupiter returns back to the place it was when you were born, it creates a sense of abundance because you're in the vibration of abundance. And so this is the time for you to take risk and jump into like really awesome opportunities, to say yes to things. Like that's when you want to do it. When my Jupiter return happened, that's when my business blew up. I made more money than I had ever made before, ever, as an entrepreneur. And I had been an entrepreneur for years and hadn't figured it out. And ever since then, I've been able to kind of sustain myself since my Jupiter return. So it's a pretty, awesome time to have that Jupiter and Cancer coming in. And so I find it interesting that by this summer, we will be experiencing that Jupiter return. So I wonder, what that's going to look like this summer and how that's going to express itself. Maybe we'll see some good luck happening. Maybe we'll see some changes. I think with Uranus right now, which is in retrograde in the sign of Taurus, it will by this Thursday all of a sudden go direct. And Uranus is the planet of sudden changes and of unexpected changes, unexpected surprises. The fact that it is in the sign of Taurus is so interesting to me because it means that we might return to an old value system, because the fact that it's retrograding in Taurus says we might go backwards to an old value system that we once had at that time, which, come on, like, what is going on? You know what I mean? Like, that's exactly what happened. I mean, that whole make America great again. At what point was it great for everyone? It wasn't. There was always, it still isn't, right? And so there's so much work to do. But it makes sense when you look at the Uranus retrograding in Taurus that we would return to values of, well, it felt like it was good for me at this particular time, or it felt like it was good, or it looked like it was good for this particular group of people at this particular time. Let's go back to that. So with Uranus going direct now this Thursday, I'm wondering again, what unexpected and surprises are we going to see once Uranus goes direct in the sign of Taurus, in the sign of values and of money. I mean, it's a lot. It's definitely a lot. The last thing that I'll say is Chiron. Chiron is our greatest healer and our greatest wound. And what I see here is that it's America is going through its Chiron return. Man, that is tough. Currently, Chiron is at 19 degrees Aries. When America was born, it was born at 20 degrees Aries. So it's right on top of each other. Oh boy. And because of that, what this means is America struggles to embrace its leadership. Because Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, it is the number one leader. Okay. Leo following right behind that. But Aries energy is number one leadership vibe. It's very strategic. It goes to war. It is very protective. It is very intuitive in that way, knows how to protect, knows when someone is activated, it and knows how to like say like, oh, let me defend and set the boundary. Very Aries energy. But because Chiron is there, part of America's problem is that it struggles with connecting to that. And so it has a hard time protecting its own people, which makes a lot of sense. Um, it knows how to protect some people but not the others. It knows how to understand this value but not that value. It's confusing, and it makes sense when you think of the fact that, well, Chiron in the sign of leadership, in the sign of strategy and clarity and boundaries, that it would struggle with all of those things. And also, when you think of how involved we are, like overly involved with other countries and their politics and things like that, that kind of makes sense as well. Because with the Chiron and Aries, it's like we don't know what we're doing, but we know that we can control this country over here. You know what I mean? Like, girl, focus on your own house. You know what I mean? Um, but okay, so that's enough about that. But on the flip side, Chiron is also your greatest healer. So if you're willing to face the challenges that are ignited by embracing the Chiron energy, which means embracing leadership in this case, which means embracing being secure in your guidance, embracing that you are the ultimate strategist, and embracing the fact that you can protect and defend and set healthy boundaries and all that stuff. If you can do that and embrace that, then you will find that you express yourself at your highest self, that you feel most in alignment, that you're like, because sometimes you got to set the boundary, and it's boundaries aren't bad. Sometimes you have to be willing to set that boundary. And America, when it gets to that place of its highest self and embraces the light of the Chiron, it should be a place where it really sets healthy boundaries and it creates great personal relationships with other people because of those healthy boundaries. It creates personal relationships. And because America, with that Mars again being in the house of relationships, if it felt motivated to protect its relationships with that Chiron and Aries, then we'd see a better America. But instead, what we see is this selfishness that's existing where, we fight each other all the time. Road rage is real. And I say that knowing that I have road rage. So I hope my husband doesn't listen to this episode and then go like, what are you talking about? You have road rage. Because I really do. And I tried my hardest, but I'm calling myself out here. The point is that it's like, we have this thing where it's like, we're so competitive and like, I want this. And, you think of like Black Friday, think of how, feral everybody gets sometimes during that season. And you're just like, what is going on? Where's the sense of community? But it's because we're so much, I can see now in our chart, we're in our shadow. We're not at our highest point. So as I come to a close, what I want to offer you is, even though right now we're going through it, the reason why I love astrology and why I love reading charts is because it does give me hope. I see the purpose of America. It's supposed to be this place that is all about freedom, uniqueness, technology, and embracing it. It's supposed to be a leader and concerned about its community and concerned about individualism and letting people feel safe. That's what it's supposed to do. That's part of its purpose when it comes to why was America created? It was created for that purpose, for the purpose of true self, authentic freedom expression. But because right now we're just in our own historical dark ages, we are experiencing the shadow side of its own birth chart. And so part of what we have to do is we have to hold on to the fact that at one point, one day, the light will return. And the only reason that it will return is because you and I have an understanding that this is somehow part of the greater story. I don't know why and I don't know how, but it's somehow part of the greater story. And so if you can hold on to that hope, knowing that part of the light that will come from within you, will come from now your understanding of, oh, wow, so America's supposed to be the home of the brave, the land of the free. And I want to create that space. So even if people are being mean to me, even if I see nastiness on the news, and even if I fear all the things that I'm hearing all the time, I know that I can't get so sucked into that because I've got to be the light. This doesn't mean avoid reality, because that is also not being the light, but create a balance in hearing what you need to hear and then creating a safe space and being that light that people so desperately need to have. So I definitely want to hear from you guys. What do you guys think of this episode? What insights do you have? You can also come and visit me on my Substack. I am really excited about this community that I'm building. One of my favorite features of it is the chat room. And so you can come and talk and share, ask questions. All of it is free at this time, but there will become a time when there will be different tiers. And so right now, this is the time to jump in to kind of explore and see what's out there inside of the Cosmic Copy, which is what the Substack is called. And if you want the link, then just go to the description and you can see it there, and just come on by. You'll meet other astrology type people, intuitive business owners, spiritual business owners. It's going to be a great time, and I'm excited to watch it grow. If you would like to get your own birth chart reading, then I would also love to hear from you. Go to the description and you can book a session with me. I would love to be able to sit down with you and help you to see who you are, what your strengths are, what makes you unique, and what your purpose is, and help you to understand yourself even better. Let's see. So offering that. And then I think that's everything that I wanted to share. Oh, also in the chat room, if you have any questions or any thoughts about today's episode, I really want to hear from you. So definitely go to the Substack, click that link, jump into the chat, let me know your thoughts. I will be excited and thrilled to hear from you. All right, I'll see you guys in the next episode. Have a wonderful day. Bye.